Welcome back on this Thursday. So glad you're joining us. We were talking in the last section of 1 Corinthians 6 about sexual immorality. Today, he's moving it from there in chapter 7 into this understanding that we have and where we learn more about God's view of marriage and of singleness. So let's take a look at the first 5 verses. Now, concerning the matter about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But because of temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but her husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Part of what he's saying is that understanding is it okay to be single or is it better to be married? He'll dig more into that here, but he says that if you're a single person and you're prone to sexual temptations, it's better to be married than to live in that temptation. This idea of the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And then likewise, the wife has authority over the husband's body. The idea, the two become one flesh, is what's being spoken about here. And that desire that they have to treat each other as they would want to be treated. That idea of husband and wife, the two become one flesh. There was a youth curriculum once that I loved the title of it. Because it really got the kids' attention, right? It says, how to have really great sex. You know what the answer was? Wait until you're married. Have sex under the premise that God designed it to be. One man, one woman for a lifetime. That's the key to really great sex. I digress. Let's move on to verses 6 through 16. Now, as a concession, not a command, I say this. I wish that all were as I myself am, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. To the unmarried and the widow, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. To the married, I give this charge. Not I, but the Lord. The wife should not separate from her husband, but if she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and the husband should not divorce his wife. To the rest, I say, I, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If a woman has a husband who is an unbeliever and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy because of the wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy because of her husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. But if the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. In such cases, the brother or sister is not enslaved. God has called you to peace. For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? As we look at this, really what Paul is saying is that every person is different. God has given different people different abilities. Some, the ability to be abstinent. Others, not. They need to be married. Singleness is good, unless it's not. When is it not? When the temptation is too great for a single person, then they should try to be married, right? So often we see this passage used as the explanation, I should say, for the priest not being married. It's really saying that if it's better for you to be married, you should be married. But if not, it's okay to be single. As we look at marriage, then, he really focuses on how divorce is not good. A divorce between Christians, they should work at resolving the differences. Now, as he goes through this, he gives the example of abandonment by an unbelieving spouse. Now, this abandonment, I see, could be emotional. Okay, it could be physical, that they leave; emotional, that they are damaging the person or is ignoring them. It could be abuse. It could be addiction. There are times when it is necessary because of sin in this world to get a divorce. However, that should be the last option and not the first. And notice that it mentions unbelieving, the unbeliever who abandons. And I will expand that to be emotional abuse, physical abuse, addiction. Why do I say unbelievers? Because, to be honest, believers should not be acting that way. We are called to love our wives, as we heard in the sermon a couple of weeks, as Christ loved the church. Husbands and wives should love and respect one another, bearing with one another, working to find that reconciliation that God has in store for each of us. Tomorrow, we'll continue talking more about how we are to live in this life that we've been called to, getting a little bit into vocation. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. God bless.